or not, but that's where we're at today. So we are beginning to go live right now on YouTube, and so we're recording there. I want to welcome everybody this morning. Hello, my name is Kevin Gullickson, and I am joined here by Dr. Scott Saunders, who's coming to us from his vehicle in California. Good morning, Dr. Scott.
I'm on the freeways of Los Angeles, so
what?
sometimes you get stuck in the morning of Los Angeles. It's just hard.
Yeah, you bet. I totally understand that. Although here in South Dakota, you know, rush hour is a blink and then we're done. So you should move here.
Oh gosh, you had 3 cars go by. Whoo, rush hour.
Oh gosh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So no, so glad you're joining us. Obviously, we're encouraging Dr. Scott not to be looking at his phone this morning. So, normally we're hosted by Joe Barton, but Joe is on the road today. So he was kind enough to let me jump in and fill in. So this morning, this is what we're talking about. We are talking about something that is exciting to me, but not. And that is fasting. And, you know, some of us, we have maybe looked at fasting from, you know, a spiritual perspective. And I don't know about anybody else, but I will raise my hand and say, anytime that I have attempted to fast, I've done it before, but like there are some times where I've attempted to fast, and it has been quite the mental challenge for me and a physical challenge, actually. But we're gonna talk today about really some amazing benefits that come from fasting, and so I mean, and it really just blows me away. So and so, Dr. Scott, before we get going though, because I want you to start off by defining, what are we talking about when we talk about fasting? Really, how do you define that, right? But I do want to share a story really quick. There's a guy on our team, who used to be on our team, and always in the best shape. Like he, you know, always has a lot of energy. And I was talking to him once and was just blown away because he's so busy with his life. Like, you know, he has a lot of kids and he's taking his kids to all these activities. He's like, Kevin, I just don't really eat. Like I eat 1 time a day. And I was like, what? Like, to me, that's like, I mean, I eat breakfast every morning. I have to start my day with breakfast. And he's like, I eat once a day. And here I am, you know, I'm a little bit overweight, eating my 3 meals a day, and he eats once a day. And, you know, I thought, man, this guy, how does he have so much energy then? Like, is that even possible? He's like in good shape and has this energy. So anyway, so Dr. Scott, I'm going to let you take it away now. If you want to get us started, like what is fasting? Like when you talk about it, what does it mean?
Yeah, let's define it first. That is really important because there's all kinds of different things. If you go on the internet, they call it, you're doing a broth fast or a juice fast or this fast or that fast. And really, fasting is one thing and one thing only. It's having an empty stomach. That's why when you wake up in the morning, you eat breakfast. You're breaking the fast. Why is it breaking the fast? Because you haven't eaten all night and you have an empty stomach. And so that's all it is. So if you always think fasting and empty stomach, then you'll get it right. If you have all these people that are marketing their products and say you can drink our special juice for your fast or whatever, or our ketone drink, there's all kinds of things now that are fast mimicking and alternative fasting and stuff like that. You know what? The reality is it's an empty stomach. And that's what you always have to look at, because that's the most important part.
Okay, so that's interesting because last week, remember we talked about sleep, and sleep is obviously very crucial. It's so important for our bodies, and we think of sleep as being restorative for our minds and our physical bodies and this kind of thing. But in a sense, by design, we are almost designed for this time of a fast then as well. And that's something that maybe we don't think about during our sleeping period, is it's also this time of fasting, right?
Oh, exactly. And if people knew how powerful that was, you mentioned something about intermittent fasting, and the intermittent fasting is a great idea. It's a wonderful thing to do, but if it's done wrong, it can destroy your health. It's not all that great just because you haven't eaten, just because you have an empty stomach. Although that's almost always good in itself, it's not so much that you have an empty stomach. It's when you have an empty stomach, because the time period is really important. If you're fasting in the morning, you don't get any benefit from that. In fact, you actually lose some benefit from that, because in the morning, you're supposed to start your adrenal glands, get started. That's why people drink coffee. The evidence shows that eating an apple is as good at waking people up as drinking coffee, and the apple lasts longer.
No, what?
That I'm serious. There was a study done comparing the two of them,
Oh
and
my goodness,
the
that's great
apple
news.
worked as well but lasted longer. Because getting your adrenal glands started is what gets your body going. That's how you get started in the morning. So eating in the morning is a good idea. And then at night when you go to bed, just like you were talking about with sleep, if you have food in your stomach when you're sleeping, you're not going to go into anabolic mode and repair all the damage that you've done all day. So you have to have an empty stomach when you go to bed. So the best time to fast is at night. And actually, there have been studies done by Dr. Sachin Panda on Muslims who keep Ramadan, which is a whole month of intermittent fasting. They don't eat from sun up to sundown.
Right.
But then after sundown, they start eating, and they often have a large meal. And so they go to bed with a full stomach. And then they often, he found that they gained weight during Ramadan instead of actually losing weight and feeling better. They didn't, because they're fasting at the wrong time. They're fasting during the day, when they need the energy. The adrenal glands need support, and then they're eating at night when they need that adrenals to drop down low so that they can make human growth hormone and melatonin. So when you fast, in your intermittent fast is really, really, really important. If you work with your adrenal glands, with your circadian rhythm, your normal natural rhythm needs to be eating in the morning, fasting at night. So eat breakfast, skip dinner. That would be the best way to go.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so now the big question then, are there benefits to fasting? So fasting differently than, just our sleep fast, right? Are there some things that take place if we, skip that evening meal, or what are the things that could benefit, if any?
Okay, all the bennies. That's really interesting, because all of these other things, these new marketing ploys, because the research has shown that fasting is so beneficial that people are, they feel better, they get better, you can eliminate diabetes entirely, and eliminate your risk of diabetes. You can eliminate your risk of Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. Well, not Parkinson's, depending on the cause. There are certain kinds, toxic kinds, but most chronic kinds of illnesses, arthritis, are completely relieved by fasting. In fact, during the Cold War, unbeknownst to anyone in the United States, the Russians were doing a whole bunch of research on fasting, and they came up with protocols. They had a clinic in the Baltics called it was a fasting clinic, But it was the incurable clinic. Whatever the doctors couldn't cure in in Moscow or in one of the cities or whatever, the hospitals with drugs and all that,
Yeah.
they would send them to this clinic in the Baltics, and they were curing asthma, arthritis, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, all sorts of incurable illnesses they were curing, and they had specific protocols lined up. They didn't even have any food there. It was like you go to this clinic and you get Baltic water.
Wow.
And but the results were dramatic. They within, it depends, within 2 weeks they could have most kinds of like asthma, they could cure. Arthritis, like rheumatoid arthritis, would take a month, and that's a month of not eating. They had a workout room, so it's important to keep your muscles, to work out your muscles. It's important to keep active so that you don't use your muscles for energy while you're fasting. You want to use fat for energy, and that's where the ketogenic diet comes in. Now, you were going to ask me about that, right?
Yeah, well, and we are still going to do a whole episode on the ketogenic diet, but Joe wants to talk to you about that one.
Okay, so I'll just say one thing about, just touch on the ketogenic diet. So the reason for the ketogenic diet, or part of it, is because fasting is so beneficial. There are so many benefits to fasting that they assumed it was because you're burning fat and you're making ketones.
Yeah.
And but you know, just the ketones gives you like 1/10 of the whole benefit that from fasting, because there's so much more to fasting than just making ketones. So yeah, ketones are useful, but really fasting, empty stomach, that's the real benefit of making big changes in your life, shutting off inflammation, losing weight, improving your metabolic function, and like fixing everything. So the reset button, like, you know, when your computer doesn't work and you call the IT guy and go, oh my gosh, my computer's not working. It's making the blip, 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 blip on the screen, and things aren't coming up very fast and takes a long time. What's the first thing the IT guy always tells you to do?
Turn it off and turn it back on again.
Exactly. Well, that's what fasting does for your body.
Wow.
So if you ever have something going wrong, just, you know, the first thing to do is to shut it off, shut off the system, turn it off. That's fasting.
Yeah.
And then when you turn it back on again, by eating in the morning, by the way, that your first meal after fasting should be in the morning. Well, we should talk about that a little bit.
Okay, gotcha. Well, I do want to take a moment just to throw in our disclaimer here. First, we are talking about a lot of different topics. We're talking about them from a very general sort of standpoint, and we want to make sure that if you are, you know, part of this webinar and you're getting all this great information, you still need to involve your doctor in what's going on with your body. And so just make sure that if you're like, hey, you know, this sounds interesting to me, I should do this. You know, we don't know all the things going on in your life, in your body, and that kind of thing. And so we're just talking about it from a general, very general viewpoint. So make sure you always talk to your doctor about the things that we talk about on these
Yes,
reversal
thank
webinars.
you. And your doctor won't know anything about fasting because we're never taught that in medical school.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In fact, in medical school, here's what we're taught: don't fast. Because it slows down your metabolism. Well, guess what happens when you have a slow metabolism? Your inflammation goes down, so all your inflammatory diseases drop down, and you quit making cancer cells. So when you have a high metabolism, you're making cancer cells. When you have a low metabolism, you're not. So, so why not fast? Because it slows down your metabolism. Wait a minute, you want a slow metabolism because that's where you get rid of all those inflammatory diseases and cancers.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. In fact, I was just speaking with someone that, you know, his sister unfortunately has cancer, and he's like, I just don't understand it. You know, she's very active, you know, very physically fit and this kind of thing. And I remember, now I can't think of his name, but a famous cyclist, got kind of surrounded by some turmoil and stuff. But I remember he dealt with cancer, and everybody was like, how in the world could that happen to him? And, that kind of makes, I'm just conjecture, but it kind of makes me wonder, obviously he's somebody that would have very high metabolism going on, so
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
Yeah, there's an ideal amount of exercise where you're not producing a lot of oxygen-free radicals.
Mm-hmm.
And more than that, you actually produce more oxygen-free radicals, which causes aging and cancer and all those things too. So, you can overdo the exercise. Some people do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so you talked about, so let's kind of talk about exercise then, and because you kind of hinted at it. I think you said move, but don't do a lot of muscle work, or I mean,
well, you have to get enough muscle work to strengthen your muscles. So the way you do it is what we always called interval training. Interval training is where you push as hard as you can for like 10 seconds, and then you relax, you do something light for 30 seconds, and then you push really hard for another 10 seconds, and then you do something light for 30 seconds. So it would be like sprinting as fast as you can for 10 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
and then jogging for 30 seconds, and then sprinting, and then for 10 seconds, and jogging for 30 seconds. And you do that for only about 10 minutes a day, for 5 days a week. And you alternate exercises too. You don't always run. So if you're doing like calisthenics, you do, sit-ups as hard as you can, as fast as you can for just 10 seconds. And then you do something really light, like walking or a light exercise. And then you push really hard again, like doing push-ups as fast as you can for 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
See how many you can do in 10 seconds, for example. And that gives you it's not an endurance training, but it keeps your muscle mass up, keeps your strength up, prevents you from using muscle for energy, and keeps your metabolism at a good rate where you can have extra strength when you need it.
Okay, so good. So when you're fasting, you can still exercise. You can do high intensity interval training.
Right. In fact, it's a good idea. That's what they did in the Russian clinic. They had weight sets, and so these people who hadn't eaten in 30 days they're just drinking water. This is a water fast for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and they'd be in the weight room lifting weights during this time.
Okay, interesting. I got a question from one of our guests, and she says, what time of day would be the best to exercise then?
That's a really good question. Okay, not right before bed. So in the morning through the afternoon, any time in there is okay. And you know what? I haven't seen any research on the best time of day to exercise. Your adrenal glands are putting out cortisol to get you started in the morning. So I always assumed morning was best, but I really haven't seen any research so that I could definitively say, oh, this is best for exercise.
Okay, gotcha. Great question. I do want to take a moment as well just to remind everybody who's watching, if you have any questions, down, if you're on the app, watching from the app on your computer, down below there should be some options to ask some question and answers. And so feel free to click that button and ask away. We're glad to take your questions at the end of the call, especially we will take whatever questions come in. And so we even have some from, I think, last week that we had so many questions last week that we're going to cover some of them on this week as well instead. So so let's talk about, I think you were going to say something about breakfast in particular, if I remember right.
Yeah. So breakfast it turns out a really important meal. And let me explain by using a study from NASA. So NASA is having these issues with circadian rhythms in the space station because there's no sunrise or sunset.
Sure.
And so they can turn on and off the lights, of course, but you know they've had people in caves for months and see what happens, and their circadian rhythm extends out. It gets longer and longer and longer over time when you don't have the sunrise and sunset to keep it on track. So so they were wondering, first of all, is it important to keep it on track? And second of all, how do you keep it on track? So they used lights, like full spectrum lights. It's like sunlight, so that the astronauts had this full spectrum light in their eyeballs, so that they would have that wake time, and that actually did help. You can change your circadian rhythm doing that. And then they had melatonin. It's actually a hormone from your brain, from your pineal gland, that is the sleep hormone that causes you to go to sleep. So they were using these, and that was helpful to some extent. And they started doing research with jet lag. And this is actually really cool. So if any of you are planning on traveling, this is what NASA found out about jet lag. The full spectrum light works, the melatonin helps, but it still takes about 1 day for every hour you want to change your circadian rhythm. So if you're going to China, it's going to be 12 days before you're on China time.
Wow.
And then when you get back, it's like another 12 days before you get back, or India or something like that. What they found, though, this is really interesting. Fasting was better than all of them put together. You could get your circadian rhythm right on track, and here's how you do it. So let's say you're going to India and you're 12 hours off, then you take India time, 8 a.m. the morning after you arrive, and that's going to be your first meal. You're going to go back 24 hours, and you're not going to eat or drink anything. You know, when they give you food on the plane, you're going to say no thank you. When you have a layover and you go, oh, let's go get something, no thank you. When you get to India at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody goes, let's go out to dinner. You say no, right?
Wow.
Because your first meal needs to be that morning wake up meal, the breakfast. You're breaking the fast.
Okay.
And that's what gets you started. That's what gets your adrenal glands started. And that will reset your clock faster than anything else.
I was just thinking, back to the reset button, just like you said about restarting your computer. It's like,
yeah. Fasting even works for your clock. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So interesting. We do have another question that I want to take now, since you had mentioned melatonin. It's about melatonin supplementation, and they're asking, is melatonin safe for supplementation?
Okay, great question. The answer to all those questions is with safety is yes and no, because you know, is water safe? Well, yes, if it's clean and clear water, and you don't drink too much, because there have been people who drink too much water and die from water intoxication. So, so the answer for melatonin is, as a general rule, yes. But remember that whenever you take a hormone is something that's secreted into your body to give information to all your cells as to what they should be doing. And this is the one that tells your body, okay, it's sleepy time. So, but whenever you take a hormone orally, like when you take it, then you're going to shut off the gland that makes it. So people take thyroid, it shuts off their thyroid gland. People take cortisol, and it shuts off their adrenal glands. Any hormone you take, there's a lot of men I have that come in and they say, oh, I need my testosterone. Well, the reason you need your testosterone is because you started taking testosterone, and now you've shut off your testicles, and you're not going to make it anymore. Birth control pills are, you know, analogs of hormones for women to shut off their ovaries. And that's the way all hormones work. So when you're taking melatonin, it's okay, but just remember you're shutting off your normal function of your pineal gland when you do that, which is not an issue for a short period of time. And as soon as you stop taking it, it'll generally just kick in again within days. So it's not an issue. There's only one hormone that I know of that is a real issue if you take it for a long period and stop suddenly, and that would be cortisol or cortisone. People that are taking prednisone, cortisone, dexamethasone, all those, they shut off their adrenal glands, and it can take a couple of weeks for the adrenal gland to kick in, which can be devastating to the body. So that's not a good one. But melatonin, if you can do it naturally, you're better off. The other thing about melatonin is the studies show most people do really well with about 1 milligram, and often even less, 0.5, 1. And you can get it now. People are talking about high dose melatonin where they're taking, 25 milligrams and 50 milligrams, or even 100 milligrams I've heard of. And more is not better for most things. More is not better.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, thank you for addressing that. I do want to just mention one of our diabetes reversal webinars a couple weeks ago was a really good one. And I noticed it's getting a lot of traction on YouTube. A lot of people are very interested in it, but it's called Diabetes and Naps. And just mentioning that, since we're talking kind of about melatonin, it's known as the sleep hormone. So if you missed that one, be sure to go back and watch that again. That's on our YouTube, Barton Publishing YouTube channel. And while we're here, I just want to remind everybody of our website where it has our latest episode. You can share the link with other people that you know that might be dealing with diabetes or pre-diabetes or anything like that. Tell other people about this webinar. We've got to get the word out to people that there are things that you can do to help reverse type 2 diabetes specifically. And so we just want everybody to know and everybody to hear. And there's so much great information that we are going to be sharing in upcoming webinars. So go to Barton Webinar, BARTON webinar.com. And also you'll find our sponsored, sponsored products on there as well. Make sure you check those out. I do want to mention one thing in particular, and that is Dr. Scott actually has a series of videos. And I don't know if we've even talked about this on the webinar, but they are like amazing, amazing videos that he shot that kind of, on the webinar, we go in a lot of different directions sometimes. And I know it can be very difficult to kind of like go, whoa, I feel like I'm drinking from the fire hose. What do I do with all of that information that I just got? This webinar or this video series helps to kind of walk through, it kind of takes you down a path, and it's called the Diabetes Detox Masterclass. And so you're going to walk down this path, kind of explaining what is diabetes, where does it come from, and then kind of into what do you do about it? Where do you go? And how do you make changes? And then we also kind of identify some kind of niche issues, like, what if you're a vegan or, things like that. It's kind of some questions that we answer along those lines as well. So again, that's called the Diabetes Detox Masterclass. We linked to it on bartonwebinar.com. I hope that you will check that out. It also comes with the Diabetes Solution Kit, which we've talked about a lot on this. So just want to throw that out there. But let's jump back into this, because I don't think we're done talking about fasting yet. Because I don't think we've really.
No, there are so many aspects.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think would be a big question that I would leave with. So we've talked about kind of times to fast, but you hear about like these, I forget what it's called, like 5-2-5, or, there's like different programs out there now where it's like, hey, fast for this many days and then eat for this many days and then fast for this many, kind of this on off thing. But what I'm hearing you talk about a lot is really fasting, not for days, but for like a certain period of time within a day. So is there, benefits to both? And how often do you do you fast?
Okay. So the fasting, having an empty stomach, puts your body into what's called anabolic mode. Anabolic, you've heard of anabolic steroids. That's like testosterone and human growth hormone. And you make human growth hormone when your stomach's empty. And you repair your stomach, you repair your intestines, you repair your brain and all your joints and your muscles and bones, all during the time that you're in anabolic mode. So if you want to be in anabolic mode a lot of the time and do all of these repairs and fixing up and making things better in your body, then having an empty stomach is a good idea. So anytime you do it is okay, and it's actually good for you. And there's no downside to it until you get deficiency diseases, which is pretty easy to avoid these days. You could, eat once a day. So eating once a day is a good idea as long as it's breakfast. There's the several articles I've read recently on every other day eating, where you have a 12-hour window of eating from like 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Every other day. So one day you're fasting, the next day you're eating, then the next day you're fasting, the next day you're eating.
Right.
As long as you stop eating at 6 so that you have an empty stomach when you go to bed, that's kind of a key thing.
Okay.
And so there's nothing wrong with fasting like we were talking about with Sachin Panda's work with Muslims during Ramadan. There's nothing wrong with intermittent fasting from sunup to sundown, as long as you don't, pig out and eat a whole bunch at night before you go to bed and go to bed with a full stomach. That's where the issue comes in. So if you instead eat breakfast before the sun comes up, that would actually be a great way to do Ramadan, for example, and you would get really healthy and reverse diabetes, and everything would just get better from that.
Yeah.
So the key to intermittent fasting is not the number of hours. It's really more the time period. It's really that you do it at night. So from the evening. So if you're doing most intermittent fasting is like a 5-hour window of eating. That's what most of them do, or a 6-hour window of eating, somewhere in there. So if you do that from let's say 7 a.m. to noon-ish, then or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you're done eating. You have 2 meals. You have breakfast, you have lunch, and then you're done. That is a great way to do it. And just like you said that about the guy that worked for Barton Publishing, you just got to wrap your head around it. You got to get the idea of, oh, it's okay not to eat. I don't have to have lunch. I can skip it. I don't have to have dinner. I can skip it. And I actually had a patient that did that, where she had done a 14-day, 2-week broth cleanse, where she was only drinking broth one time in the morning, and that's all. Every morning she'd have her broth so that she didn't get dehydrated. She didn't have electrolyte imbalances or anything like that. And then she was traveling one time, later on, after she'd started eating and everything. She was traveling and she got to her destination, and it was kind of late at night, and she goes, gosh, I haven't eaten anything, didn't have any food before she came. She's gone for restaurants, and all of a sudden he said, wait a minute, I've gone for 2 weeks without eating. I'll just go to the hotel. So she went to the hotel, slept all night, woke up in the morning and had breakfast. It was like, oh, it's okay to not eat, because she had done it.
Right.
That's a key.
Yeah, good stuff.
Get your head around it.
Okay, so the question for you, because we're talking about this, the concept really is empty stomach. Usually when we think about, because we kind of compare it to dieting, I have, and especially if we're trying to lose some weight, what is the difference between fasting versus caloric restriction, or restricting your calories? So, instead of fasting, you're decreasing the calories intake for your meals, right?
Yeah, yeah, that is such an important question. And so in the 1940s, 1940s, early, 1940s, people that did not, that were conscientious objectors to the war, were drafted, still had to do something. So what they did is they were used as all kinds of and some of the experiments they did were on fasting versus caloric restriction. And the results are dramatic. If you go look it up, it's like, wow, diet is horrible. And I don't know how through the 50s and 60s, everything about diet, you look at the grocery check stand and you look at all the magazines, the women's magazines especially on there, every single one of them has a this diet and that diet and my diet, this and the diet. So much about dieting when the research has shown for now 60 years, 70 years that that dieting is.
All right. Well, I think we have lost Dr. Scott. Of course, he has been on the road there, driving.
Are you there? Okay,
Oh,
I'm back.
there he is. Okay. Yep, we have you again, I believe. Go ahead.
Okay, so and this is really important, so I don't want to say everything. So what was the last thing you heard?
So you were talking about the women's magazines that, you know, have like made dieting like this constant thing that's just right in front of us all the time in the grocery store checkout, you know? All right, Dr. Scott, I think you're cutting out quite a bit. So we're really not even catching any of the words that you're saying now. So, well, once again, you guys, I want to thank you for jumping on here. I apologize for the tech issues. We seem to have a few tech issues every week, but usually we jump right back into it. But this is such an important question. I knew he was going to be like, we've got to address this, the caloric restriction versus the fasting. And so if we do not have Dr. Scott join us again on this call, we will address that on a future call. So I'm just going to say this. I just want to encourage you guys once again, be sure to check out bartonwebinar.com. We will post this video up there very shortly. That will replace last week's video. So last week's video was awesome. It was about, I mean, Dr. Scott said something that was shocking to me and to our team, actually. He said that we really emphasize, high blood sugar a lot, but really what we need to look at first is insulin resistance. And so he talked a lot about the difference between those two and how insulin resistance actually begins to happen first, and how we need to be aware of that and test for that. So I know even on our team, several of us were like, wow, we need to test for our insulin levels. So just want to encourage you, go back and watch that video on insulin resistance last week and make sure that you understand that concept. It looks like Dr. Scott has joined us again.
Yay, can you hear me?
Yay, yep, we can hear you. So
okay, good.
Go for it.
Okay, so
about the magazines.
Right. So all of the magazines and all of the stuff that they're talking about for diets, and dieting in multiple studies for the last 70 years has shown to be problematic in that people lose muscle mass and they gain fat. And so restricting calories is really not a good idea at all. You don't live longer from restricting calories. You live longer from fasting when your stomach.
All right, I think we've lost you again. So sorry, Dr. Scott. Rough morning on the LA freeways. Okay. So I think what we're going to do is, Dr. Scott, I don't know if you can still hear me, but I think that we're going to hold off on that and bring it up again next week. I know you've started to address it and it's really good. And I want to make sure that people hear and understand and know. So next week on the call, that is something that we are going to talk about, caloric restriction versus fasting and the difference between the two and the damage that caloric restriction can actually do to our bodies. So I do really quickly before we go, I don't see that we have too many questions for Dr. Scott today. I'm sorry, I didn't really ask for too many questions, but I do want to ask, one of our attendees this morning is Pam. And Pam's been joining us on these webinars for a little while. And I just wanted to ask Pam, would you be willing to join me on here for just a few moments, just to share kind of what you shared with Leslie a couple days ago? And no pressure if you don't, but I would welcome it if you do. Okay. So she said, I can.
Okay.
What do I do? And so, okay, I'm going to go over here to my attendee panel and find your name, and I'm going to allow you to talk. Okay, Pam, I think we can hear you. So, hello, welcome, good morning.
Morning.
So,
can you hear
Pam,
me?
Yes, I can hear you very clearly. So, thanks for jumping on with me. First of all, I just want to say, Pam, like, I appreciate you so much. Like, to us and to our team, we are fans. We are big fans of Pam. All right. And I say that because you've really taken the bull by the horns with your own health and have made some really significant changes. And I just want to say to you, we're really proud of you, and kudos to you for doing that. And so I just wanted to see if you would share just a nugget for us of just kind of I don't know, just a quick thing of like, what's taken place in your life, what's really made the difference for you. And I think you had watched the diabetes masterclass videos, is that right?
Yes.
So do you want to tell us?
I had done a video with Leslie. Yeah. So really, I got a hold of. I realized that taking medicine to quote unquote cure my diabetes was not the right approach. That the medicine was not going to heal me. The medicine was just gonna, let it progress and trick me into thinking I was okay. And once I realized that, I said, oh, I got to make changes. I came across the diabetes reversal kit and listened to Dr. Saunders' material, and it's made a huge difference. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to eat after 6 o'clock at night, and I didn't know that the reducing the carbs and stopping eating after 6 o'clock at night have both made huge changes. The carb reduction is really big too.
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily looking to lose weight, although that's been a wonderful side effect. I've been doing this since February. I've lost 40 pounds. But
wow.
I've been able to get off of a lot of my medicine. I'm not quite off the metformin yet, but I'm getting there. And I want to get my sugars to a spot where they're normal. But even like I was telling Leslie, when Dr. Scott's program last week, find it on YouTube. You have to listen to it.
It was
Insulin
good.
resistance versus checking your sugar.
Yeah.
That was huge.
Yep.
I had no idea, so I've got to go get the insulin resistance test. But that's what I want to do. I want my body to take the insulin it's supposed to take and not to be putting the sugar into my bloodstream. But what I need to do to eat and get there is what I want to do, not rely on medication. And this program and these materials have helped me so much, and I recommend them to anybody. It's good stuff.
Well, Pam, I appreciate that so much. And this was like very spontaneous. It wasn't intended to be like this big promotion, but I'm just, like I said, like, we're just so proud of what you have accomplished. And I do want to mention too, because I listened to your interview with Leslie, and I know that you've been working with your doctor. And so this isn't like I listened to some program and I just cut my my medications. It was like I have a desire to move off of medications, and I haven't I'm learning now the things to be able to do that. And then I'm working with my doctor, who says, yes, I see the changes that you're making. I see the numbers change. And so now you can kind of begin to move in this direction. So yeah. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing that. And again, just want to encourage everybody, check out the Diabetes Solution Kit on bartonwebinar.com. You'll see more information about that. Thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. I apologize for the technical issues. Next week we will be back on, and I believe Joe really wants to ask Dr. Scott about keto and keto diet specifically. And is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It's really popular right now. And so we want inquiring minds want to know, right? So again, thanks for joining us this morning, and we look forward to connecting with you guys same time, same channel next week. In the meantime, go check us out, what you've missed on YouTube, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, Dr. Scott. Appreciate you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a good, safe drive there.
Okay.
All right.
I will.
Bye, everyone. Dr. Scott, do you have another joke for us?
Oh. No, I can't think of one. Darn it.
Bummer.
I had one. I was thinking of one the other day. I was like, oh, I got another joke, but
let me see. So I was at Scouts with my son last night, and they always like to tell jokes. Let's see if I can get it right here. One of the scouts said, "Hey, have you seen the movie about the tractor?" And the other one said something like, "No, but I've seen the trailer." Bad joke. I don't know. I don't think that's exactly how it went, but good. All right. See you guys.
All right. See ya. Bye, Kevin.
Bye.